The Brickyard is back. The engines are roaring at one of the most legendary racing venues in the entire world, and the NASCAR Cup Series has once again come to Indianapolis Motor Speedway for one of the biggest races on the calendar. The 2026 Brickyard 400 promised history, pressure, and a chance for one driver to etch his name into one of NASCAR's most prestigious events. And by the time the checkered flag flew, the story was even bigger than anyone expected, because standing in victory lane at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was not one of the usual veterans. It wasn't a former champion looking for another crown jewel. It wasn't one of NASCAR's biggest superstars. It was Corey Heim. In just his 15th career Cup Series start, Heim delivered one of the biggest victories of his young career, holding off Christopher Bell and Joey Logano in a dramatic finish to claim the 2026 Brickyard 400. And this wasn't just another Sunday afternoon race. This was Indianapolis. This was the Brickyard. And this was a race where every lap mattered. Welcome to the full NASCAR Cup Series highlights and race recap of the 2026 Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The green flag was ready to fly, the crowd was watching, and the drivers knew that the next few hours could completely change their seasons. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is unlike almost any other track on the NASCAR schedule. The 2.5-mile oval has 4 corners, long straightaways, and a history that demands respect. The emotion in victory lane told the story. The team had executed when it mattered most. The driver had stayed calm under pressure. And when the biggest moment arrived, Corey Heim delivered. For Christopher Bell, second place was a strong result, but it was also a reminder of how close he came to taking the win. Bell had the speed. He had the opportunity. But on this day, Heim was simply too strong. Joey Logano finished third, adding another strong result at one of NASCAR's most historic venues. But once again, the Brickyard victory belonged to someone else. And that is what makes this race so special. The Brickyard has a way of creating unexpected stories. It has a way of taking drivers who are not always the center of attention and putting them under the brightest spotlight in the sport. Corey Heim took full advantage of that opportunity. But the 2026 Brickyard 400 wasn't only about the winner. There were winners and losers throughout the field. Some drivers left Indianapolis with momentum. Others left with questions. Kyle Larson's crash was one of the biggest disappointments of the afternoon. A driver with championship ambitions simply couldn't afford a result like that. Every driver knows that winning at Indianapolis means becoming part of something much bigger than a single race. The names of NASCAR legends are connected to this place, and every year another driver gets the opportunity to add his name to that history. This year's field arrived with plenty of storylines. The Brickyard 400 was not only another points race in the NASCAR Cup Series season. It was also the final round of the 2026 NASCAR In-Season Challenge, adding another layer of pressure to an already massive weekend. The drivers had fought through multiple rounds to reach this moment. Now, everything came down to Indianapolis. At the front of the field, Carson Hocevar was ready to lead the pack to the green flag. Behind him, the intensity was already building. Ryan Blaney, Todd Gilliland, Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Christopher Bell, and a long list of Cup Series stars were all looking for the same thing: a Brickyard victory. And as the pace car pulled away, the field came to life. Green flag. The 2026 Brickyard 400 was officially underway. Hocevar got the jump as the field charged into the opening corner. The cars were packed together, but Indianapolis is a track where drivers have to be patient. You can't simply throw a car into every corner and expect to survive. The long straights create opportunities, but the corners punish mistakes. The first few laps were all about finding rhythm. Drivers were searching for grip. Teams were watching tire wear. Crew chiefs were already calculating fuel strategy. And at the front, Carson Hocevar was trying to establish control. But behind him, the pressure was coming. The first stage was quickly becoming a battle of track position. Every driver wanted clean air. Every team wanted to stay out front. and every crew chief knew that the race could change with one mistake, one tire problem, or one caution. Indianapolis doesn't forgive mistakes, and eventually one of the biggest names in the field found trouble. Kyle Larson's day took a dramatic turn during the opening stage. Larson was involved in a hard crash after losing control of his Chevrolet, bringing out a caution and immediately changing the complexion of his race. For a driver with championship ambitions, it was a brutal blow. Larson was able to walk away from the incident, but his race was effectively turned upside down. The caution gave the field a chance to regroup. Pit crews jumped into action. Some teams came down pit road. Others stayed on the track. And once again, the strategic battle began. At Indianapolis, pit strategy can be just as important as raw speed. A driver can dominate for dozens of laps and still lose everything because of a bad pit stop. A team can struggle early and suddenly find itself in contention because of a perfectly timed caution. That is the nature of racing at the Brickyard. As the opening stage continued, the battle at the front remained intense. Gibbs emerged as one of the drivers making a major impact early in the race. When the first stage came to an end, Gibbs was able to secure the Stage 1 victory following a one-lap shootout to the line. But the race was far from over. Not even close. The second stage brought a completely different challenge. The track continued to evolve. The cars changed as fuel burned off. Tires became more important, and the pressure began to rise. The leaders were running close together, but passing was difficult. At Indianapolis, a driver can catch the car ahead without necessarily being able to make the pass. That creates a unique kind of tension. The driver behind has to decide whether to wait. Does he save his tires? Does he protect his equipment? Or does he make the aggressive move and risk everything? The answer can change from corner to corner. Meanwhile, the teams were continuing to monitor the developing race. The championship picture was also becoming more important with every lap. Drivers fighting for playoff positions couldn't afford a bad result. Drivers already locked into strong positions wanted the win. And drivers outside the playoff picture knew that Indianapolis could be their opportunity to change everything. The Brickyard has always been a place where unexpected heroes can emerge. And slowly, the name Corey Heim began to move toward the center of the story. Heim wasn't supposed to be the obvious headline, but he was fast, and more importantly, he was consistent. Lap after lap, he stayed in position. He avoided the major mistakes. He kept his car clean. And while other drivers were dealing with problems, Heim continued moving forward. The race entered its later stages, and suddenly the conversation changed. Could Corey Heim actually win the Brickyard 400? The answer was becoming more and more believable. The final stage arrived. The pressure was now enormous. Every restart mattered. Every pit stop mattered. Every decision from the crew chiefs could determine who would be fighting for the win in the final laps. And then came the moment that changed everything. Corey Heim moved into position to challenge for the lead. Denny Hamlin was also involved in the battle as the race entered its critical closing stages. The 23-11 Racing connection made the moment even more interesting. Heim was racing for a team connected to one of the most experienced drivers in the sport. But there was no room for friendship on the track. This was the Brickyard, and everyone wanted the trophy. Heim kept pushing. The laps continued to disappear. The Indianapolis crowd could feel that something special was developing. Behind the leaders, Christopher Bell was closing in. Bell had the speed. Joey Logano was also right there. And now the three drivers were becoming the center of attention. Heim, Bell, Logano. Three very different drivers. Three different stories. One Brickyard victory. The final stretch was approaching, and suddenly the pressure was enormous. For Heim, this was an opportunity that might never come again. For Bell, it was a chance to add another major victory to his growing resume. For Logano, it was another opportunity to finally capture one of the biggest wins that had continued to escape him at Indianapolis. But Heim wasn't giving it away. The young driver remained composed. He stayed on the racing line. He hit his marks. and he refused to make the mistake that so many drivers had made before him. The final laps were a test of patience. The fans were watching every move. The teams were holding their breath. And every time the cars entered Turn 1, the question was the same. Could anyone take the lead away from Corey Heim? Christopher Bell was trying. Joey Logano was trying. But Heim continued to hold the advantage. The white flag appeared. 1 lap to go. One final lap around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. For Corey Heim, it was the longest lap of his young Cup Series career. The pressure was enormous. Bell was still there. Logano was still there. One mistake could change everything. One missed corner. One tire issue. One aggressive move. But Heim stayed focused. He powered through the corners. He carried the momentum down the straightaway. And then he came into the final corner. The checkered flag was waiting. Corey Heim had done it. He won the 2026 Brickyard 400. The young 2311 racing driver had just captured one of NASCAR's most prestigious victories. Christopher Bell crossed the line second. Joey Logano finished third. And the celebration began. For Heim, this was a defining moment. In only his 15th career Cup Series start, he had now won twice at NASCAR's highest level. And both victories had come during a part-time Cup Series schedule. That is an incredible start to a Cup Series career. But this victory was different. This was Indianapolis. This was the Brickyard. And this was a crown jewel moment. For Larson, the focus now turns to recovery. The season continues. The playoff picture continues to develop. And every point matters. Meanwhile, the drivers who finished near the front can leave Indianapolis feeling confident. Christopher Bell showed that he had the speed to compete for the win. Joey Logano once again proved that he belongs in the conversation whenever NASCAR's biggest races arrive. And Corey Heim? He left Indianapolis as a Brickyard winner. That's a title that will stay with him forever. The victory also adds another chapter to the history of the Brickyard 400. This race has always been about more than simply finishing 400 miles. It's about surviving the pressure. It's about understanding the track. It's about executing strategy. And it's about being perfect when the opportunity arrives. Corey Heim was the driver who did that. The 2026 Brickyard 400 will be remembered as the race where a young driver stepped into the spotlight and refused to give it back. From the opening laps to the final showdown, the race delivered everything that makes NASCAR special. There was speed, there was strategy, there was heartbreak, there were crashes, there was pressure, and finally, there was celebration. But perhaps the biggest story of all is what this victory could mean for Corey Heim's future. Drivers don't win at Indianapolis by accident. It takes talent. It takes preparation. It takes a great team. And it takes the ability to perform when the pressure is at its highest. Heim has now shown that he can do exactly that. The question is no longer whether Corey Heim belongs in the NASCAR Cup Series. The question is how far he can go. If this is only the beginning, then NASCAR fans could be watching the early chapters of a very interesting career. For 2311 Racing, the victory is another major achievement. For the fans, it is another unforgettable Brickyard story. And for Corey Heim, it is a moment that will define his career for years to come. The 2026 Brickyard 400 is officially in the history books. Corey Heim is the winner. Christopher Bell finishes second. Joey Logano takes third. And Indianapolis once again delivers a race that NASCAR fans will be talking about long after the engines have gone silent. The Brickyard has a new winner. A new story has been written. And a young driver has officially announced himself on one of the biggest stages in motorsports. So, what did you think of the 2026 Brickyard 400? Was Corey Heim's victory the biggest surprise of the season? Can he become a future NASCAR Cup Series championship contender? And which driver do you think will win the next crown jewel race? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this NASCAR race recap and highlights breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the latest NASCAR news, race highlights, and post-race stories. Because the NASCAR season is far from over. The championship battle is heating up. The playoff picture is taking shape. And if the Brickyard 400 taught us anything, it's that anything can happen when the NASCAR Cup Series comes to the track. From Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the 2026 Brickyard 400 has delivered another unforgettable chapter. And this time, the name written into Brickyard history is Corey Heim. The young driver has arrived, the Brickyard belongs to him, and NASCAR may have just witnessed the beginning of something special.